Welcome. Thank you all for attending the University Staff Council's annual forum. My name is Christina Ballard, and I have the honor of serving as the current council chairperson. A quick remark on what the USC is. We're your representatives. Staff under the Office of the President are represented by the 39 individuals who make up our council. We sit on task forces and external committees. We address issues brought to our attention through simply emailing staff@tamu.edu. We oversee the Staff Emergency Fund, which awards money to those going through temporary hardships. And we write proposals and memos to improve the staff environment and experience. In short, we are staff voice. If you want more information on who we are, visit staff.tamu.edu. Some quick housekeeping rules of engagement for today's panel. Please put your questions in the Q&A box. Our amazing behind the scenes staff is going to get those questions put into our queue. If we don't get to your question today, don't worry, we'll be posting answers to those on our website, along with a recording of today's forum. So look for an email about that soon. Last, there will be a survey pop up when you click leave meeting. Please take a moment to share your thoughts with us so that we can continue to improve this forum every year. So that's enough about us and the housekeeping. You're here for the panelists. I have the opportunity to introduce our panelists today and serve as moderator. To be honest, they don't really need an introduction. They may be interim, but they are all longstanding leaders in our A&M community. So first up is Dr. John Junkins, our interim president.
Good morning, and thank you, Christina, for your leadership. I had a chance to get acquainted with you when we were both serving on the presidential search. It's really important for me to address you this morning, I feel, because I want to express to you my appreciation for the staff. You're a big part of the glue that holds this university together, and your service is very, very much appreciated. I'm humbled by this opportunity to say hello to you and meet with you. As you know, I'm in about day 60 of my presidency, interim presidency, and my main job this spring is to keep us from running into any icebergs as a university, and to try to solve short-term problems and with a sort of a 3-month or 1 semester horizon to make this university a great landing pad for the next permanent president, whom, as you all know by now, is Dr. Kathy Banks, who will be taking over later this spring or at the end of the semester. For those of you not acquainted with me, I was recruited to this university from Virginia Tech in 1985. I was the first endowed chair professor in the College of Engineering, and I've had an incredible opportunity to watch this explosive growth in volume and quality of this university. It's been a wonderful place for me to spend the prime years of my career. Most recently, I have been, for the last decade, I have built an Institute for Advanced Study. I wrote a proposal, and mercifully it got approved. And this Institute for Advanced Study cuts across every college in the university and allows professors to dream the impossible dream. If I could have anyone in the world, a star in my field, to come join me for a year and work with me and my graduate students, who would that be? And the Institute for Advanced Study is in the business of making those dreams come true. So with a very short proposal, a professor can change their life by going around all of the inertia of the university with this proposal. So this I'm very proud of, and this probably is the reason that I'm sitting here today. Is the chancellor and the regents had a chance for me to see me take an idea from a cartoon to reality, and marshal the forces of the university and interface with all the deans and so on to do that. Ordinarily, you would not expect a lifetime a professor who had no ambition to even be a department head, let alone a dean or a president, to become president of the university. But as the chancellor said when he essentially coerced me into saying yes, he said, "Listen, Junkins, I didn't come here for a debate. I came here to get your agreement to do this. It's important service to the university, and you're a rocket scientist. You'll figure it out." Well, I've been figuring it out for the last 60 days and doing the best I can But I can assure you the next president will be much, much, much better than the second coming of John Jenkins. It's my great pleasure to interact with you this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Junkins. You're starting us off with some humor, setting the bar high. Dr. Weichold, I'll let you introduce yourself next. Dr. Weichold is our Interim Provost.
All right, thank you, Christina. Good morning and howdy, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to visit with the staff this morning. I've had the opportunity to know and work with Christina for a number of years when I was in my engineering post until just recently, and appreciated that opportunity. And now I get to work with Christina once again, slightly different setting. A little bit about me, I guess. I'm a first generation student, college student in my family. Graduated from Texas A&M in 1978 with a degree in electrical engineering, and got my PhD from Texas A&M, and then joined the faculty in 1982 in electrical engineering, and happily served in that capacity for a number of years. And then in the summer of 1998, I became the Associate Provost for undergraduate programs, and served in that role for about 8.5 years. During my time in that position, I became involved in setting up and negotiating the agreement that put in place our branch campus in Doha, Qatar. And so beginning in January of 2007, I began my time over there as the campus CEO and dean, and spent 9 years there until December of 15, when I came back to College Station. Rejoined the College of Engineering, and Kathy asked me to serve as, serve in a couple of roles. And prior to coming into this interim provost position, I was the Senior Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the College of Engineering. It's kind of like what Dr. Junkins said. I didn't really have any aspirations to be a provost. I was happy doing my engineering things as the Senior Associate Dean, but when Dr. Junkins gave me a call and asked me to consider doing this, I was flattered and very happily signed on to it. Like him, I'm in approximately day 60 or 64 or whatever it is. And I think it's safe to say that we have not had a dull moment since we sat down in these chairs. It's been a lot of excitement, but it's been good. And I was very pleased to see the Board of Regents announced Dr. Banks as the sole finalist, and look forward to working with her in a transition mode in the coming couple of months as she prepares for assuming the presidency on the 1st of June. But more immediate, I'm looking forward to having good conversation with folks here today. Appreciate the opportunity, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sensing a theme of really good leadership being poached for higher leadership positions here. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Amy Mcgowan, our Interim Vice President and Associate Provost for Diversity. Please introduce yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Christina, and the Staff Council for having us. Looking forward to engaging you in conversation as well. I am by trade an accountant. I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, a master's degree in accounting, and a PhD in accounting. So I guess you can say I'm officially a bean counter. I've been at Texas A&M now, I think, for 26 years, and I have held a number of hats during my tenure here, including serving as the director of our professional program in accounting for about 8 years. And then moving on to Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at Mays Business School, where I created and designed the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for Mays Business School. For the past 2.5, 3 years, I've served as the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs. Undergraduate programs is really my passion. Dealing with undergraduate students is kind of the thing that I enjoy most. But I will admit that diversity and inclusion has always been a part, integrated into what my teaching, my service, as well as my research. Being only one of very few faculty of color in the business school, that I felt that it was important that the work be done. So I stepped up to do it. Never envisioning that I would have the opportunity to serve in a similar role for the university, having no formal training in diversity and inclusion, only my lived experiences and my love of scholarship in the area. So I hope to bring all of those things to the table and to be approachable to each of you in hopes that I will be able to engage you in joining to help in doing this work, because there is a lot of work to be done in this area, and it can only be done if we engage the entire campus community, and the staff is an integral part of that. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Dr. McGowan. I already have a lesson learned from you. I can call my accountant husband a bean counter. Thank you all for the overview of your areas. So now that we have our panelists warmed up, we'll start with some of our questions. As you know, we invited staff to submit questions in advance when they registered, and boy, did they ever. We had over 100. So let's get started with an easy one, and this is open to any or all to answer. And knowing that Dr. Junkins already knows his successor and timeline, what are your top 3 priorities over the next, it says 6, but let's say 2 to 3 months? And what is the biggest impact you hope to make during your time as interim?
Muted.
Okay, I'll start. I guess the 3 priorities that I would list off the bat is the number 1 is really dealing with the pandemic in a way that allows us to continue to delivering education, research, and service, but with the constraint that we keep the faculty, staff, and students as safe as possible while dealing with that. So that'd be my first priority, is how do we manage this pandemic. I think just the way the life unfolded, I inherited the account of the CDI report, the Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I started, as soon as I was asked to do this, I started studying that and trying to raise my level of education to the point that I could provide some leadership there. And so early on, I tried to, engineers always try to figure out what is feasible. And that's usually a set of possibilities, not a single outcome. And within that set, trying to do the very best we can to get a good solution. And a lot of the feasibility was dictated by what I could get through the Board of Regents. And so I spent a lot of time trying to study the problem and what would be an ideal solution, and what could we do that I could get through the regents. And I sort of speed dated every one of the regents, some of them multiple times during December and early January. And we came out in collaboration with the staff and including our provost, and including our vice president for diversity gathered here today, and quite a few other individuals. And we came up with a proposal that went to the regents. And so this spring, it's very important that the outcome of that, which gave us $25 million and 6 parallel thrusts that are underway right now, to see those come to fruition is extremely important. And we have a March 26th deadline for those groups to report their progress, and that includes a variety of investments and ways to assess and improve the climate on campus. And then I think the third thing that would jump off the page, given the season that we're in, is I have to work very diligently to make a smooth transition between President Junkins and President Banks. This is extremely important to me. That will continue throughout spring semester and possibly through the summer, depending upon what needs to be done. Because all of the initiatives that we're doing in DEI, for example, will not be complete. That's a 4-year plan, and we have to have a mechanism to ensure buy-in by the new president and also to engage her in a way that makes sure that all of the work we've done is not in vain this spring. And so that will be a big part of it. So I think one of the things I would hope that when we look back at the spring, and it's really not my legacy, it's our legacy. The leadership here, I think Annie and Mark are a big part of that picture. I would hope we look back and see that our joint efforts this spring represent an inflection point in the history of the university. It may be overstatement to say that I believe we have a change in climate already. There's somehow this, it feels different to me. I hope I'm right in that perception that we're listening to each other better and not talking past each other as much as we were last year. So I hope we're on a track to see that come to fruition and to see that the climate of the campus is on a trajectory to be significantly improved in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really just channeling our core values better with that, just saying them as words. I want to see that we're more true to our core values, and that this is the beginning of that trajectory. So those are my goals, and I hope to continue working hard through the end of this semester and beyond, because I think I want to help the President Banks in a transition that doesn't just stop when I leave this office. So thank you for the opportunity to express those thoughts.
Thank you. Dr. McGowan, Dr. Weichold.
You want me to go first, or Andy, you want to go first? Andy, you're muted. If it's okay, I'll just go ahead and jump in. It was interesting for me to listen to Dr. Junkins, because his top priorities really are exactly the same as my top priorities. As an interim, I have been around here long enough to have served under a number of interims, whether those are department heads or deans or presidents or whatever. And I think one thing that I appreciated during those interim spells, whichever ones they were, was when that interim provided some steady hands on the wheel, so to speak. And I want to try my best to do that, to provide steady hand during the transition. A lot of people have asked me what I want to change and do I have an agenda. My agenda is to make sure that we keep things going the way they have been going, because I think they're going well, and to prepare for the next provost to come in. A number of people have asked what my timeline or what the timeline is for that to happen. That's a really hard thing to predict. It's going to require a search and find somebody to come here. Everything's going to take some time. So my best guess, and what I'm telling everybody, from my wife to anybody who asks here, be prepared for me to be in this position anything between 12 and 18 months. I think that's probably a reasonable time frame to find a new provost. But in the meantime, there's lots of trains running, and I want to make sure the trains all run on time. I want to make sure the lights are on, and we're just taking care of business. The other thing that I would mention is very much along the lines of what Dr. Junkins mentioned, was the work that we're doing following the Commission on DEI report. I thought the report was very well written. I think they made some very good observations and provided a very sound foundation for us to go to the Board of Regents, as Dr. Junkins did, and did it very successfully. The next 3 weeks or so are going to be very critical, because that's the time period during which these teams and task forces are meeting and coming forward with the recommendations. But again, as Dr. Junkins said, this is not something that's going to happen in the next 3 months, 2 months. It's going to be a long period of implementation for these things. But the good news is the Board of Regents has made a significant financial commitment to this, as well as making sure that that financial commitment spreads over a period of time of 4 years. The last thing that I would mention is, as a priority, again, is something that Dr. Junkins mentioned, and that is dealing with the pandemic. We are, I think, making some good progress in terms of, excuse me, in terms of the vaccinations and that sort of thing. And I hope that we continue to see that progress. The projections of having everybody in the United States vaccinated by the end of May is very encouraging. I hope that comes to pass. But then people immediately will ask, well, what are we going to do in the fall? And my advice to the deans and department heads on the academic side of the house is to prepare for the fall to deliver the courses in much the same way we deliver the courses in the spring. So there'll be a mix of traditional face-to-face lectures, some online, some remote, and so forth. That said, I'm also open to the reality, not open, but I accept the reality that the conditions are constantly changing. We could find ourselves 3 months from now in a much better or a much worse situation. I just can't predict that. A lot of it depends on behavior of humans way outside of my control. But we're going to have to make a decision, and my target for making the decision on how courses are going to be offered in the fall is the middle of July. That's about as far as we can go and still have enough time to make whatever adjustments we need to make. In my ideal world, I'd like to be able to flip a switch and go completely back to the traditional online courses. That's not going to happen in the fall, but neither is the highly restrictive mode that we were operating in this past spring. So I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, and I think I'd like to think that we are headed on a path that will get us back to the traditional mode of instruction and learning very, very soon. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you. Dr. McGowan.
Yes. Well, as Dr. Junkins and Weichold have mentioned, a lot of my goals for this period as interim vice president have been determined by the mandates in the commission's report. However, I took on this job primarily to protect the work of my 2 previous predecessors, Dr. Christine Stanley and Dr. Robin Means Coleman, who made some very substantial contributions to diversity, equity, and inclusion in regards to our method of accountability for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And more recently, in terms of faculty recruitment, the ACES program. So one of my primary goals is to protect that work and to make sure that we elevate it and move it forward, and to expand the ACES program in a way that would capture or deal with the needs of the next cohort of colleges or departments that would like to participate. So to put my ear to the ground and determine what portions of that program actually are beneficial to the department, and maybe construct another version or of the program that would meet the needs. The program has proven to be very successful in recruiting faculty of color to Texas A&M University. So we want to see how we can leverage that. but understanding that the ACEs program cannot be the only initiative to address that problem. The other priorities have to do with my work in addressing the issues from the Commission's report. As a Mays faculty member, I have run a summer camp to recruit minority students for many years. And one of my greatest frustrations has been in the mechanism for reaching the targeted groups, for communicating with their families. So I've learned a lot in that process about what the issues are. So I'm hoping to bring that to bear with the group on communications and outreach that I chair with Amy Smith, to design a sustainable platform for outreach to those communities. So we have an excellent team put together that includes high school teachers. It includes marketing professionals, for example. It includes people from the communities that we're trying to reach, as well as communications, a good communications team. So we want to design something there that whoever takes on this role later could use to actually help to diversify and recruit students, and to project a new image for those students and allow them to be able to see themselves as a successful Aggie. In addition, the climate or the campus experience is something that I would like to offer some meaningful change towards developing a more inclusive and engaging campus community that would be inclusive of everyone, faculty, staff, students of all identities. So there's a lot of work to be done in this space, but I'm excited about the opportunity to do it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, our next question is for Dr. Junkins, and it is, when will the hiring freeze be lifted?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. The most formal answer I can give is that we don't really have a hiring freeze, although I know it feels like one. There's a restriction on hiring that says that justification has to be put forward through the college, the provost, and to the president. So I have approved a very significant number of hires during the time that I've sat here, but that means that have to be very high priority, filling a hole that's very clear to articulate, and so on. But everything is driven by the budget, and as you know, we had a 5% cut last year, and I know that there's questions about what happened in my visit and the chancellor's visit to Austin in the last 2 weeks to defend our budget. I'm guardedly optimistic that if the budget comes out as I feel it likely will, and we'll know in May, then next year I feel like will be a different climate budget-wise, and that will affect both hiring and raise prospects. But I can't give a definitive answer, but I'm guardedly optimistic that we will be in much better shape within a year time frame. And we just live in a tough time because the state of Texas budget shortfall is almost $1 billion in tax revenues, and so the state budget climate, we had I call it swimming upstream in alligators to get our budget either static or maybe slightly increased, and I'm guardedly optimistic we'll get a slight increase in spite of the budget climate that we have, and we'll have to see how that actually plays out.
Thank you. The next question is for Dr. McGowan. It is, what is A&M doing right now to support our students and employees who are people of color?
Well, we actually just finished with the commission, the President's Council on Climate for Diversity, reviewing all of the work that has been done all across campus to support students, faculty, and staff. And I can say that there is quite a lot of work being done. I'd like to preface this with the role of the Office of Diversity, what we're charged with doing. Basically, we're charged with helping the university to meet its diversity and inclusion goals and to meet its land grant mission to serve the entire state of Texas, people across all genres. So in that regard, what we do is to work collaboratively with the units on campus to facilitate this work in those particular units. A number of things that are on tap or that we're trying to put into force. For example, I think that staff have asked for more training in the area of diversity and inclusion. So we've identified a vendor for that training. And I'm working with Human Resources, the Office of General Counsel, as well as IT to determine where those training sessions can be housed and actually how to roll them out, for example. We would like to also offer those opportunities for students. We also work collaboratively, let's say, with the Office of Student Success to support students' needs and to eliminate disparities between students of color, for example, or first-generation college students and the general population. We, not exactly through our office, but our office supports the work, for example, to integrate diversity and inclusion training in the first year experience. And all colleges are participating in the first year experiences. Some colleges have their own. Mays has its own version. We don't participate, for example, in Hullabaloo U, but there are diversity and inclusion modules included in the first year experience opportunities as well. And I think that the work that we do on climate is specifically to support everyone, faculty, staff, and students. Always open to suggestions. As I said, this is a collaborative effort. So if the staff council, and I understand that we will be considering some of the recommendations from the staff council on our committee for faculty and staff retention. So I'm looking forward to working through Christina, actually, to address the needs of the staff council.
Thank you. Yes, the University Staff Council is really excited to share that retention improvement for diversity and equity retention plan with one of the committees that came out of the commission. We're excited. Following up on what you just spoke about, Dr. McGowan, someone asked, will those diversity trainings and materials be available to other campuses like Galveston and Health Science Center?
We're in the process of right now of deciding what the best platform will be. We would like to roll it out to everybody. So we're thinking train track, but in the process of exploring where is the best place to house. So I don't actually have the answer to that question yet, but we would like to make it as broadly available as possible.
Thank you.
Is the goal.
All right. Dr. Weichold, this question's for you. It says, what can we anticipate as targets for future growth of the university? And do you see this as a period of unique opportunity for enhancement of the university programs like online degree offerings, technology enhancement, et cetera? And Dr. Junkins, this might cross over with you a little bit, so feel free to chime in after Dr. Weichold.
All right, thank you, Christina. the university has grown tremendously. I mean, it is astounding to me how large it's become. Just a point of reference for me, when I began my studies here as a freshman in the fall of 1974, the entire university's enrollment was less than 20,000. I think it was 18,000 or something like that. And now today, the enrollment just in the College of Engineering is more than the entire university had when I was a freshman. Now, admittedly, that was 40 some odd years ago, and things are going to change. But for me, this has been a tremendous growth, particularly in the last few years. At this point, I have not had any conversations with either President Junkins nor with the sole finalist, Dr. Banks, about continued growth. My sense is that we have grown dramatically in the last few years, especially, and I think it is something we need to consider very carefully before we continue to expand the population of students here at Texas A&M. But I'll have those conversations, and we'll make some decisions as the time is appropriate. The second question, I think, is one that I hope we have some positive outcomes from all this pandemic activities that we've been engaged in. And in particular, what I've been observing is some remarkable acceptance, if you will, of the online environment. Now, it's not universal. There's still some discomfort and some challenges and everything like that. But I know from my colleagues in the faculty that many of them prior to this would never have thought about offering their courses online. They had a litany of reasons for not doing so. Beginning last spring, about this time, reality changed, and we found ourselves having to offer things online that we would never have dreamed of before. And I think one positive outcome from that is that people who had very serious reservations about doing it found out, yeah, maybe it's not so bad. And not saying that we're going to switch everything over to online after the pandemic goes away. But my point is, I think people on the faculty, our students as well, have learned that there are some positive things that we can do in an online environment that could supplement the face-to-face. I taught a freshman seminar course this past fall, and the decision was made to teach all of these seminars online. And it was my first opportunity to teach any course online. And, thank goodness I had some really good freshman students that were in that class and devoted to the environment and everything. We made it through, but I think we all agreed, students and me alike, that we much would have preferred seeing each other live and in person. So I'm not advocating we abandon live in-person lectures, nor am I suggesting we go to strictly the online delivery of instruction. I think there's some opportunities here, as the question anticipated, to perhaps build on this and offer more online courses, more online certificates. I think there's quite an opportunity for the university in those regards, in particular in continuing education using certificates. Many people will get into their first or second job and realize that they need some more training in one area or another. And maybe I'm thinking about this from my engineering experiences, but many engineers graduate with a very, very solid engineering degree, but then they get out and practice and realize that a lot of engineering employment involves things other than solving engineering problems. It involves dealing with people and finance and accounting. And to be able to offer courses in a continuing education mode for our graduates, for others as well, obviously, I think would be a great thing. And I think we've got some foundations now to build on that would have not been so possible in the past. We have I think, grown accustomed to, maybe not comfortable with, but accustomed to working at home more than we would have anticipated maybe a year ago. And that could well change how we do business, not here just at the university, but in many different sectors. I've even heard some people, not at Texas A&M, but some people say this may even impact how we design future brick and mortar structures. We may not need so many offices. People can hot desk or something and spend 4 days out of the week at home working and so forth. Again, this is not something Texas A&M is considering, but it is something to think about. We can do a lot of what we do from home. Some jobs we cannot. It'll be interesting to see how we evolve to the new working environment that follows this pandemic. The pandemic's been terrible. There's no doubt about it. But some of these things that I've mentioned and talked about, I would like to think are maybe some of the positive things that will come out of this very tragic period of time. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Dr. Weichold. It's a good segue. We got a live question, and I'll direct this to Dr. Junkins about anticipating continued flexibility for alternative work locations even after the pandemic subsides.
Well, let me follow up on Mark's remarks. I think this really plays together. We are in the midst of a nationally, the United States is in the midst of a transition, in my opinion, that is accelerated by the pandemic and by the remote learning. I sense a national trend where there will be fewer people willing to pay $8,000 a month to live in New York City if their job is primarily in the information technology, where it clusters around, much of your work clusters around interacting with software online. So I think that a lot of jobs will be shared remotely and perhaps intermittently go to an office. I might mention that my son is a computer scientist at Intel, and he started his career 25 years ago in Portland area, where the main Intel plant is. He's a software developer, and 20 years ago he was one of the first persons at Intel allowed to telecommute. He moved his family to Bend, Oregon, and would go to the office maybe 1 day a week, sometimes 2 days a week, 300 miles away. So it was a pretty good commute. But he's been doing that a long time, and he is actually supervises a group of about 30 or 40 people, and he's still telecommuting. There's a big difference there because there's a fiber connection between Bend and Portland. So he uses a company intranet instead of an internet, so they can do things that we can't do. For example, he can run any software on anybody in this discussion. I could run software on your desk and have everybody see it, or vice versa. So you can run, the bandwidth is such in that setting that you can do a lot more. But he prefers that mode of interaction. The collaboration software is ahead of Zoom. And even when he is in his Portland office, frequently he can have 10 people up and down the hall gathered around a common desk, and everybody pointing at code and doing things on the same screen. So there's a lot happening in the virtual interaction and engineering in particular, I'm aware of, in computer science arenas. So back to the growth question for Texas A&M, and I'm sorry I've lost the thread on this question, but I wanted to comment. Interestingly, quite apart from COVID and these things we're talking about, the university has actually been trying to arrest the rate of growth for the last 2 or 3 years by offering fewer admissions, but the acceptance rate keeps going up for Texas A&M. And as you all know, we're the go-to university in the state of Texas. And so people have been accepting at a higher rate. And so our growth has really not been as much dictated by wanting to grow as we're getting higher rates of acceptances. And I want to mention one other thing that couples into this discussion. Several of our branch campuses of Texas A&M University system have been dramatically improving in the last few years. The quality metrics on their students and their graduation rates and so on have been improving. So there may be a model, and I'm giving a fuzzy answer here, but there may be a model where some of the students that are coming to Texas A&M, if we try to arrest our growth, will go to the other campuses of the A&M system, because I think there is a sense, a feeling that we're getting really large in the State Council of Higher Education and in the system, in the Chancellor's office. I don't think there's ambition to go to 80,000 anytime soon in terms of the size of Texas A&M. So I think there is a move to arrest the growth, and that's quite an addition apart from the mode of education. But we're definitely in a state of flux, and some optimal mix of in-person and online is coming. I feel it. But I want to give just one final punctuation mark here. I feel there's no obvious replacement for face-to-face as regards inspiration. Everyone in my generation can point to usually a single-digit number of individuals who have a presence about them that can't be captured in this online mode. You're in the classroom with them. It's very inspirational to have that one-to-one feeling, and also to have the personal connection that becomes lifetime friendships. It's harder to do this in the virtual environment. I have produced 55 PhD students, and 26 of them have become professors. So I have 160 PhD descendants. And I don't know 100% of those, but I know most of them on a personal basis. And when they come to College Station, they stay in my house. It's known as Hotel Junkins. These are family. And how do you get that kind of a bond that is life-changing experiences for people that allow you to know your mentors and know them in not just a virtual way, but you really know them personally, and they feel like relatives in a real sense. And I think that's that element of face-to-face is something precious, and we should be slow to surrender it, because it's really in my life, it's the reason I'm sitting here, is I had a lot of mentors that took a deep personal interest in me and helped me be the first PhD from my county that made this transition to sit where I am now. So there's something there that we really ought to hang on to and say, okay, how do we get the optimal leverage out of these tools, but not use it as a replacement for face-to-face, in my opinion. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question. Repeat it if I missed the point, but I hadn't been thinking about Mark's question. So Christina.
I believe the last question asked was about alternate work location and whether that would still be considered an option moving forward.
I think it will be, and especially we have circumstances. One of my good friends just retired. His name is Thomas Straganak, and Thomas had meningitis in midlife and became wheelchair bound. And the mobility aspects really were a tremendous burden on him. Our campus is not so friendly for somebody that needs to run from building A to building B between classes and teach, and just the mobility aspects of it. And also, he didn't feel like coming to school every day, but he may still feel like giving his lecture virtually. So having options certainly on that space is tremendous. And also when you have a course that, let's say I'm doing software development and teaching a computer science course, the software, especially as it evolves to become more like the software my son is dealing with, because the software we're using right now will be different a decade from now, count on it. and the bandwidth will be higher. We'll have 5G, and we'll be able to do more dynamic things. So I think we should embrace this change, not as the replacement for face-to-face, but find the optimal mix. And I don't have that answer today, but we'll be finding this mix, and it will be a time-varying thing. But in some courses, it will be quite acceptable. Courses where you have hands-on laboratory obviously cannot be done virtually. You have to have, you've got to be in the physical laboratory. The laboratories are expensive, the equipment is expensive, and you need to be there. And again, you need mentoring. That's very difficult to do looking at a screen. You need to have the hands-on experiences. And so there are many things. I don't expect veterinary medicine is going to go virtual anytime soon, of the teaching of those students and so on. It's just discipline specific. You absolutely have to have the laboratory and the face-to-face aspects.
So I think specifically for this question, it's focusing more on the staff perspective. A lot of staff positions are, I'm hearing some feedback, so I know they're working on your end, Dr. Junkins, to sort that out, but if you'll mute your microphone for the time being. So I think what a lot of the questions that we've seen come in are alternate work locations and flexibility for staff. In addition to that, you know, parking flexibility, and what will the summer and fall look like for staff positions. We can come back to that while we're sorting out your microphone feedback. We received another question, and this one I'll direct to Dr. McGowan. You've already touched on your work that you are beginning with the commission groups that were recently announced. This question is, the university is claiming to deal with racism by supposedly increasing efforts by the diversity office to increase equality. Please explain how we are eliminating racism by creating racism. We have more programs than ever before that exclude based on race, skin color, and gender. We have a multitude of scholarships that are race and skin color based. We've allowed departments to set up conferences and fill their web pages, asking that faculty and staff denounce their whiteness. How is any of this creating unity? You cannot defeat racism with racism.
Well, thank you for the question. I'm happy to try to attempt to shed some light on the issues that you've brought up. First of all, everyone brings their own perspective about this to the table. Your perspective is informed by your own unique experiences. I believe that when we create interest groups, such as the question mentioned, women, or for example, at Mays, we have the National Association of Black Accountants. Let's just use that for an example. So this is intended to allow people who are underrepresented on our campus the opportunity to build community with people that share interests. However, others are not excluded from joining. When we hold a women's leadership conference, we actively invite men to participate because solving the problem that women experience will require us to reach out to men that are in the workplace and help them become aware of what the issues are. Because you can't solve the issue until the issue has been identified. So we definitely want to work towards this in a very inclusive way. Secondly, the problems that we're experiencing right now are due primarily to the development of a social construct called race hundreds and hundreds of years ago, where people were categorized by the color of their skin, and that different social policies were applied differently to people based on those colors of the skin. So I use the analogy in this way. Let's say you have 5 children and 2 of your children became ill. One had a headache, and let's just say another one had a poisonous snake bite. You would not apply the same treatment to all 5 children that you would to the one that had the headache or the snake bite. You wouldn't force all of your children to take aspirin or an antidote for a snake bite. You would only give it to the ones that actually needed it at that time. So in order to meet our land grant mission, that policy to me makes sense. Basically, that we're all better as a whole if we elevate and apply a cure to the cause that's affecting a portion of our population, because essentially we're all a part of one community. Why is it not considered racism? For example, let's say a scholarship applied to a particular group, let's say first-generation college students. To me, this is not based on race, it's based on socioeconomic status. There is a need that has been created by the climate that existed in our country before. So how do we eradicate that disparity without using some of the same groupings that were created that caused the problem to occur in the first place? So we have to thread the needle through the same dark hole of creation in order to eliminate the problem that we use to create the problem. And then hopefully we can, when we're all on an even playing field, we can dismantle the system that caused the oppression in the first place. I would agree that if we were, for example, handing out scholarships arbitrarily to only Black people, only Hispanic people, that would be a racist policy. However, the way that we have created this structure, the scholarships are based on merit. It would be racist if we were taking resources from one group and giving it to another group. We've created additional resources so that the group that has the resources now will continue to have the resources. But at the same time, we can elevate the amount of resources given to attract the students that we're trying to attract. So I would encourage you basically to look at this scientifically, follow the scientific method in solving the problem. First, identify the problem and what is causing the problem. And basically come up with what is the structure that is needed to eliminate the problem. And I think that if we apply some of what I know from my business background, for example, we operate in a competitive market. And if we would like to contribute to educating the entire state of Texas and attract students from minority groups, then we have to realize that a part of the problem is that we're not competitive with the scholarship packages for the top students in that field. So we're awarding scholarships based on merit, based on socioeconomic status, and factors that are legally allowed by law. So racism, I think, would mean that we're eliminating opportunities for other groups, and we're not doing that. We're expanding opportunities for all groups.
Thank you. I'm looking at all of the Q&As that your answer has sparked, and it's amazing. So I wanted to pass on, a couple of people said thank you for all that you do for our university's marginalized groups, expanding on why men should be included in these discussions. There are several male allies who are keen to address these issues. This is from a moral and civic point of view. We know women who we respect, love, and adore. We too want to be involved and help, but for the right reasons. So thank you. And I did want to share those.
Yes, good. Could I follow up? If one feels excluded from a group, then that is part of the information that we need to solve the problem as well.
Yes.
Yes.
I did want to circle back. Someone brought up that a lot of what we've spoken about in the realm of diversity and the climate here at Texas A&M sort of revolves a lot around students and marginally or connectedly faculty. Can you expand on what one of your groups is doing right now in the realm of staff diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because I know that obviously our audience is staff, so they are going to be eager to know what specifically are we working on to address
Yes.
the staff perspective here.
Yes. So the group that actually we've asked Christina to be a part of has to do with the recruitment, retention of staff as well as policies to support the climate for staff. And I mentioned earlier that the Office of Diversity is not a standalone office. We work with other offices. For example, Jeff Reisinger and I in our committee have been engaged in a dialogue about how Flourish, for example, could be used to support a healthier climate for staff. Some of the work that we're doing, Dr. Junkins mentioned our core values. We are looking for ways in campus engagement community to actually activate the core values, not to change them per se, but to actively engage the entire community in living the core values. I also thought of a toolkit. We're working on one for undergraduate students, one for staff. I noticed when I was dean of undergraduate programs at Texas A&M that I started sending out correspondence that people typically would just send to faculty, but an advisor would also need to know that information. So including the staff in emails that you think, for example, might only relate to faculty was very helpful. And I noticed that I would always get tons and tons of responses. Thank you for including us. So these small things, with your help, we could actually design the structure for a platform that would actually assist in creating a culture of respect. I think that's the key word for the work that our staff actually contribute. In my experience, it's always been the staff that are the first to step up, particularly with respect to diversity and inclusion, supporting diversity and inclusion initiatives. And when we have those, for example, difficult dialogue series, the room is filled with staff. So I view staff as our strong allies in this work. And I really would like your input on the things that you need. So your voice really does matter here.
Thank you. And just as a reminder for our audience, if you do want to submit feedback or comments, email staff@tamu.edu and it submits a ticket, and we meet bi-weekly with the Vice President for HR. And we also uplift any sort of overwhelming or global kind of issues that staff are facing to the Office of the President. So please do use that resource at staff@tamu.edu. And Dr. Jenkins, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Weichold.
If you don't mind, I'd like to jump in and just say a couple of words. One of the things that Dr. McGowan mentioned triggered this thought, and that is the critical role that staff play in the functioning of this university every day, day in, day out. But I want to draw particular attention to the critical role that certain staff members played while we were experiencing that terrible winter storm. And specifically what I'm thinking about are the people that came up and made sure that lights were on, floors were being cleaned up, sheetrock was being dealt with, all of those things. IT was in place, power was running. A number of people came Friday before the storm and checked into the campus hotel and stayed there many nights, well into the following week, to take care of the various needs that the campus had at that time. And while I appreciate that very, very much, just on the basis of what they did for the good of the campus, I appreciate it even more knowing the sacrifice that some of these people made, because they also live in this community and they also had families that were experiencing the terrible conditions, but yet they were here on campus taking care of our needs and still having to worry about their family members, children, spouses, and everything. So my heart goes out to what they did for us, and I appreciate that very much. Just want to throw that in right quick. Thank you.
Thank you. We've received a lot of comments thanking acknowledgement to the staff in the background working, so I appreciate you calling that out. Dr. Junkins, we've had quite a few questions about the COVID-19 vaccination being required for faculty, staff, and students. Can you talk a little bit about that? You're on mute.
I'd be delighted to speak to that. I think technically we can't require the COVID-19 vaccination. That it's not a law. We strongly recommend it. That everyone be vaccinated as soon as they're eligible to receive it. The state, has laws on some vaccinations. For example, bacterial meningitis. In public schools, you have to have, unless you have some very small set of reasons for declining to be vaccinated. So someday there'll probably be a law on COVID, but as usual, we're fighting the last war in our laws. They'll be lagging behind at some time. But at present, I'm going to be discussing with our next president, Kathy Banks, how we're going to handle this issue when COVID is available for 100% of our citizens, but some people decline to take it. So we don't have a firm policy at this point as to how we're going to deal with that going forward, and I don't have a good answer for that. I would just strongly encourage everyone to take it. I've had my 2 shots and had zero reaction to either one of them. So it's something that I believe in, and all of the best advice I've got is that this is really important, and so I will emphasize it, but I can't require it, and we won't require it under current law. But I don't know what policy we will have in place. That will be something that is not really an issue, in my opinion, this spring, but will start becoming an issue in the summer when vaccinations are available for everyone.
All right, thank you, sir. Dr. Weichold, this is a 2-part question. In the second part, Dr. Junkins, Dr. McGowan, please feel free to answer after him. What is being done to ensure auxiliary branch campuses like the law school campus in Fort Worth has access to the resources we need, particularly as it relates to mental and physical health and well-being of our student body? The second part of that is, how do you see the ways of changing the culture of mental health from a leadership perspective?
Thank you, Christina. The locations that Texas A&M has around the state, each and every one are important to us. We want to ensure that we provide the faculty, the students, and the staff at those locations the sort of support that you've mentioned here. Specifically in law school, I've had conversations with the dean there, and it's clear that he's also committed to providing that support. I've mentioned some programs that we have in place here in College Station, and he is looking at providing local, that is Fort Worth-based extensions of those programs for the law school folks. But at the bottom line, we want to make sure that all of our employees, whether faculty or staff and students, have access to the support, whether it's mental health, physical well-being, or whatever, no matter what their location is.
Let me pop in on that just a moment. We all know that certainly we've had several students, had 3 student suicides, and we've had no student deaths due to COVID. And I don't know that we have a number on the, I haven't heard of a staff suicide, but this virtual world we're living in, we didn't mention earlier, one of the downsides of that is because virtual is not the same as face-to-face. Many people feel very isolated and depressed under these circumstances. So that's very important. I think the Flourish program, which has lots of virtual communities, everything from aerobics to yoga and many other exercise and movement classes and health sessions. We need to be using the tools and encouraging the use of these, and the leadership at all levels, I think, and I know that Mark does this, are encouraged to be alert for any sign of depression on their staff and advise individuals who we believe are depressed to take advantage of the counseling that is available. If you see troublesome behavior that you aren't even sure of, you should have a one-on-one. We encourage leadership to do that. But back to Flourish, physical and mental activity are just so important. I know in my case, I have to have physical activity to kind of get the cobwebs out. And it's really important over my career that I have maintained a lot of exercise and things that aren't sitting at a desk all day, and also interaction with people on some basis other than what you're doing at work. Have a life outside of your office and find ways to do that as best you can under the COVID constraints, but more generally, we should encourage people to have a work-life balance that I think is very, very important to mental and physical health. But beyond that, just the main thing is to be aware that for the leadership of every unit to be aware and be sensitive to the people around, and if you detect signs of depression, and really try to intervene in an appropriate way, in a confidential way with that person to help them get some help.
I know that Flourish is a program under Human Resources. However, I wanted to share some of the comments coming in about Flourish. A lot of it is praise. Some of it is the talk, has there been talk about expanding this program to cover sister campuses? And another comment was about whether leadership has recognized and seen staff benefit from the awesome programming that comes from Flourish, and how you see the future of Flourish playing a role in helping with overall wellness of staff, especially during the ongoing pandemic as well as post-pandemic.
Well, the few remarks I gave, I just say really are addressed to that question. I don't have a program in mind right now, but maybe Mark and I and Annie can talk about this a bit offline and look for how we can do a better job going forward. As regards to expanding it to the branch campuses, I don't see any reason we couldn't do that. It seems to me like that'd be a straightforward thing to do.
Thank you. All right.
Christina, if again, I'd like to jump in here just for a second. One of the things that Dr. Junkins mentioned triggered this thought, and that is toward the end of January, as we were beginning to close out our first year under the COVID conditions that we were operating in, it became increasingly clear how much stress and anxiety people were experiencing as a result of that. For concerns for their own well-being, the strangeness of working from home and remote environment and so forth, dealing with office hours that we're not used to dealing with in those ways. So we had some discussions internally, and we recognized that the anxiety and stress that we were hearing about was not confined just to students or just to faculty or just to staff. It was a university-wide concern. And so I asked Tim Scott to put together a team of people to look at that and try to find some best practices that would be maybe universally applicable to everybody at the university, but maybe some that are specific to students or specific to staff and so forth. I had asked for him to present his findings and his suggestions by the 1st of March, but with the winter freeze that we had, I gave him a reprieve, and so he's going to produce that report and those recommendations for me on Monday. But when we get those, I want to push those out and see if we can do something to help everyone on campus deal with these situations. You know, this idea for identifying relief, if you want to call it that, came before the winter storm, and the winter storm just exacerbated it even more. And people are still dealing with the fallout from that in terms of getting their homes repaired and everything else. So in the foreseeable future, I don't see it just naturally evolving and taking care of itself. We're going to have to put some things out there to help our people. And I just want to reassure everybody that we are working on that and hopefully push these things out very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. McGowan, we received a comment about your latest answer. So thank you for your responses on the diversity of staff. Could you expand on how these programs have improved the diversity of staff, given that certain careers seem to be dominated by certain genders or races? How have these programs improved the diversity in this area?
Well, I think in the State of Diversity report, which precedes me, we do show some improvement in the diversity of staff and faculty. However, I'll be the first to admit that the growth thus far has not been enough. It is not sufficient. One of the issues that we can see is that while we might have put in increased effort into recruiting more diverse staff, that the turnover rate in certain areas is still significant. So attention to the climate and the factors that affect turnover among staff is something we need to pay careful attention to moving forward. And I don't claim that we have already solved that problem, that some of the discussion in the groups that we're working on right now are designed or will be designed to address that particular issue. But I do think that we have improved in the past 5 years in terms of the diversity of our staff. The turnover, however, also needs to be addressed in order for us to make sustainable gains in that area. So we are discussing several mechanisms for creating a process around that.
Thank you. A follow-up in addition to that, someone asked, how can we get involved with the planning and implementation of the available opportunities and initiatives? So I know with the commission, they had public forums, they had an email that staff could, that they invited staff to share their opinions. What is the possibility of collaboration in the future moving forward?
That's actually a very good suggestion, that if we created some mechanism for people to provide suggestions, recommendations, but for right now, I would say through your staff council representative, that I was very excited to hear from Christina that there was a report on the table from the staff council. It is very important that we understand the issues from your perspective. We plan to do some focus groups as well, but creating some type of mechanism where people might actually report these ideas and suggestions is actually very good. I would also say that you can shoot me an email at amcgowan@mays.tamu.edu. And I am always willing to accept good recommendations and to engage you in dialogue about it. That's a part of building this sense of community and having every voice participate. So I would appreciate that. We have a short turnaround time, but that is actually a good recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Jenkins, we received a few questions about the restrictions regarding promotions and salary increases being lifted. Once the restrictions are lifted, do you plan to offer extra compensation for the months these policies were in place? What can staff do in the meantime while they're waiting for promotion and salary increases to lift?
Well, first of all, the 5% cut we enjoyed in quotation marks last year, and the freeze on the salaries increases, the merit increases that were recommended last spring. Those recommended increases will take effect in the very, very near future. I think, Mark, is that March 1 or April 1? I don't remember the date, the effective date, but it is.
The raises will go into effect on March 1st, and then will show up on the April 1st paycheck.
Right. So I believe there will be another invitation sent out based upon this year's performance for raises in September. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe we'll be able to entertain recommendations for increases in next September. I regret to tell you that I don't believe there is a makeup for the gap that we have enjoyed. Raises should have taken place last September, or that's just being delayed until now. So I don't think there's a formal makeup. Budget constraints allowing, I think there may be some qualitative thoughts about how can we make up, but all of that has to be play through budget reality. And since our budget reality is not visible yet, we will know the university biennium budget, I believe, in May. And so it's premature for me to guess what that's going to be. So all I can do is stall for time and allow this to play out and throw this forward to President Banks to see what reality is with the constraints that we have available, dictated by by our new biennium budget.
Thank you. I'm going to use this as a public forum because the USC actually addressed parking mid last year. I know parking is one of our departments that suffered one of the most financially across campus with COVID-19, but a lot of staff has asked that we look into some sort of reduced parking or post, I guess, reimbursement for parking that hasn't been used. And I know that we've brought it up with parking and it's not financially possible, but I did want to bring it to the leadership here to see if there has been a continued conversation about how parking might be in conversations at that level.
I will deal with that one as best I can. I don't have a very satisfactory answer, but parking actually was hit among the hardest of any unit on campus because they depend upon ridership of the buses and so on, but they couldn't, they had to maintain the facilities and infrastructure in place, and that loss of income, having trouble paying the salaries and so on. So their budget is in very sad shape right now. And I hesitate to tell you, but I don't see the feasibility of doing much in response to this question, at least in the immediate future. And I'm sorry that I don't, but I can't manufacture money out of thin air. And so the budget for parking and transportation is being reviewed thoroughly right now, but even the rest of the spring, they're still running a lot of red ink because of the ridership being lower. And so I don't have a satisfactory answer for you, and I'm very sorry that I don't. But I don't see a way to say anything other than we'll have to play this forward along with several other budget issues and do the best we can. But this will be under the auspices of the next president, and I'll try to commiserate with her on what's the best way forward. But I don't have an answer right now. I'm very sorry.
That's all right. We don't expect you to have all the answers, and I appreciate you raising it and bringing it up with the next president. I know parking has been a financial burden sometimes to a great deal of staff. So whatever we can do to continue the conversation and seek answers. We've received a few questions about tuition assistance programs, specifically that the staff are able to benefit from tuition assistance, but only for College Station campuses. I'm sorry, only for the College Station campus. So the question is, what about staff who work diligently behind the scenes, but can't afford to attend the university that they support, especially when the employee benefits don't do much in terms of the flat rate fee programs or classes for full-time workers are only offered at other campuses like Houston. The ATRO certificates are great, but inequitable compared to a degree.
Mark, would you like to try that one, or would you like me to handle it?
Well, I'll give it a try. The programs that we have in place here, I think, are intended for the College Station campuses. Certainly, the use of tuition assistance funds at institutions other than Texas A&M, I just don't have any familiarity with that. I have to ask others about whether that's even possible or not.
Just thinking out loud, and again, we have an evolving relationship with Blinn, and there may be courses there that fall in this space that we might be able to work some deal with their presence out at the Willis campus, but I don't have that as a definitive answer, but it might be an area to explore. Mark, we could talk about that offline. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer.
All right. Again, sometimes it's just asking the question and seeing the continued pursuance for an answer later. All right. Going through our Q&A. Dr. Weichold, to what extent has the university implemented changes that will stay long-term after the pandemic? I know we've seen a great deal of advancement at the university over the last year. Research expenditures over $1 billion, highest number of student enrollment, historic and nationwide, AACDC expansion of inclusion, transition of OGAPs to the graduate and professional school, etc.
I think part of my answer would go back to what I was saying earlier. I think some of the things that are going to stick around long after COVID is behind us has to do with the work and the learning environment. I mentioned earlier, and I'll say again, I think we've all gotten a bit more comfortable with the online work environment. We may not all be comfortable with it to the same degree that we're comfortable sitting behind a desk or a workstation or whatever in person, but we're more comfortable with it. So I would expect to see aspects of that remain. One example would be, instead of in the future convening a meeting and have 12 people sitting around a conference table, maybe we'll convene a meeting and 3 people will attend in person and the other 9 will be joining virtually or something like that. I think also something that's going to remain is the opportunities that we have for getting involved in professional activities, attending conferences and those sorts of things, for instance, or board meetings or committee meetings or something like that at locations away from the university. I know I'm part of several groups that involve people literally from all over the world. And one of those is the Texas A&M International Advisory Board. We have people certainly from North America, but also from Europe, South America, Asia, and so forth. And although the board only meets twice a year, it's still burdensome for some of our attendees to come physically to College Station. But what I noticed in the fall was when we had our meeting, we had the best attendance that we've ever had. It was virtual attendance, but nonetheless it was attendance. So I think those sorts of changes in practice will probably remain. It's not going to do away with the live symposia or conferences or meetings and that sort of thing. But again, I think we're more comfortable doing those sorts of activities now. We have seen some shifts, some changes. I can't say that the creation of the graduate school is a result of COVID. It certainly began before that and came about, I think, independently of it, but it's going to be part of the campus from here on. So I think the things that we have been doing to change and continue to move forward with or because of or in spite of COVID, I see those staying and flourishing and growing just as they would had COVID not been here.
Thank you. We've received quite a few questions about the disparity of education and title on campus between faculty and staff. So I'm going to try to summarize several of them together. One is, in previous professional leadership roles, how have you navigated and resolved contention between groups of diverse educational backgrounds to achieve a more positive academic workplace climate? More specifically, regarding groups working closely together, like tenure track faculty, staff, graduate students, etc. This is sort of a any and all.
If the question is asking for examples of things that you've done to facilitate that?
Advice or examples, advice that you'd offer to individuals on a lower end of a group's educational gap, maybe?
Right. Well, in my prior experience, I think the focus on the strategic plan universally was the key. And for example, if we wanted to increase inclusion in the business school, then we integrate that as a part of everything that we do. We integrate it into the curriculum, we integrate that into advising, we integrate that into service. So when we offer professional development, we do so with all of those groups in mind. The other place that my mind went when I heard this question, integrating or helping two groups work closely together would be an example. So we have a group of graduate students from an underrepresented group who would like to make a contribution to the extracurricular activities of their discipline or the co-curricular activities of their discipline. They write a proposal, they submit it to their department or college, and it is rejected. So my role in that regard is to bring the parties together, to have a difficult dialogue, to help the students to see what may have been lacking in their proposal, for example, that caused it to be rejected, and to have the faculty and staff on the other side address the students' concerns so that everyone can walk away from the situation understanding their role in creating the confusion that was caused or the feeling that a particular group did not belong. So basically, the goal is to engage all parties in a constructive solution to a problem, whether it's faculty, staff, or students, and working across all groups.
So I'm going to direct the question a little bit. Oftentimes we hear reports that staff are not respected in their departments or their workplaces because they are staff and not tenure track faculty members, or they don't have the education that we perpetually push in a institute of higher education here. So I think that these questions are really revolving around how do we affect change in the climate that staff are in right now when it comes to the lack of respect or acknowledgement when it comes to that disparity.
Yeah, so I'll refer back to our core values. Is that our core values are the foundation for that. The goal is to find a way to actively engage all parties in living out the core values. That is a part of what we are trying to tackle with the Committee on the Campus Experience. Basically, what does the core value mean in terms of inclusion? What does respect mean in terms of inclusion and belonging? And how do we motivate each faculty, staff, or student member to engage in that on a more personal basis? To view staff are my colleagues as well as faculty are. So how do we look towards viewing them on that level and valuing their contribution? I think that that some of the answers to that rely in our core values, but also some of these are human resources type issues that have to be addressed in the units in which you're operating in and addressed immediately.
Thank you. I do want to share that the Staff Council is working with HRO right now to open up communication between staff regarding supervisory leadership roles, just because there is that gap of knowledge when it comes to, if you don't know that something's wrong because someone can't say it, they don't feel protected to say it, how do you say it? And how do you correct it if you're not aware of the problem? So you want to share that that is something that we're aware of and are kind of trying to work with HRO to address. Yes. But know that in your leadership roles that the climate is not just tumultuous when it comes to race. It's also when it comes to the disparity of education and role here on campus.
Well, the current Your Voice Matters survey is very important. You have our assurances that you will not be identified as an individual person, but we would like for you to use that opportunity to share with us what the issues are and what the current state of the climate is. So please consider completing the survey at yourvoice.tamu.edu. I think that identifying what the potential problems are will give us a lot of ammunition in directing towards a problem. I will also say that I get a number of issues related to staff as stop hate reports. There are several mechanisms for communicating that information. The more immediate one would be through the climate survey. So I would really recommend that you complete the survey and give you my word that you'll be protected and that the information will be used for the common good.
Thank you.
Let me chime in on this question just a little bit. Having been a professor for now 50 years and having been through quite a few at the department level, quite a few transitions at 3 different universities, UVA and Virginia Tech, and here for the last 35 years. The way the department functions at the department level is critical to the quality of life of everybody, including the staff. And a number of models I've observed, I've never been a department head, but I've observed some great department heads who really knew how to engage staff and faculty well, and to give everyone a voice. And so this really gets down to, in addition to whatever formulas we put out, it gets down to really the respect word, and also to the judgment of the department head, how they run the department, or how they lead the department. And most departments have a lead staff person that is the executive assistant of the department head. And there needs to be, number one, frequent and well-structured meetings. And frequently those are with the department head and the lead staff person sitting down for an hour and going over the operation of the department. And again, the department head needs to emphasize to every member of the faculty the R word and interacting with the staff and trying to the intervention of the department head when there is a problem that becomes evident. So this is the key to climate. It's down at the fundamental academic unit level, and it has to do with it's centered on the department head and the management and the sensitivity of the department head to problems and the responsivity of the department head to problems, and then solving when issues arrive, addressing those. And Mark may have some remarks on this, but this has to do with the provost can communicate this message to the deans and the deans to the department heads, but there's no replacement for having a great department head to address these problems. And that to me is the fundamental key. Human beings being what they are, there will always be issues bubbling up on this front. I know that maybe some of you have noticed that the correlation between arrogance and having a PhD is not zero, and that some people get too proud of themselves, and it doesn't play well in interpersonal relationships, faculty to faculty and faculty to staff. And the only way to keep a lid on this and to keep the climate running smoothly is to have great administration of the departments. And so that really is my answer to a lot of the issues here. Is the deans have the responsibility to get great department heads and to give feedback to department heads when they sense problems at the college level, and having climate surveys and having that information shared with the deans and well, first of all with the department heads and with the deans, and that those feedback loops need to be active, and it needs to be a part of the evaluation of a department head is how well do they resolve these issues or help resolve them. And so those are all my answer to this question is to really focus on how departments are run.
I would also say that in terms of accountability, that knowing whether we're moving whatever the mechanisms that we put into place are working, that one measure of whether it's working or not would have to do with the number of reports that we get. Is the only measure that we have to know whether the climate is improving, or if you fill out the survey and we get better results this year than we did in the past 5 years. So some mechanism of accountability, I think, would be important, including the climate survey, but not limited to that. So we have to know when incidents occur to know if we're doing better or worse in that regard.
Thank you. And I do want to remind everyone, the attendees today, that the questions that we don't answer, we have earmarked several that are really in the HRO realm of things that impact staff, and we are going to bring them up with Dr. Reisinger in HRO's office. So know that if we don't answer them, or as some of our panelists have said today, if we don't have a definitive answer today, the buck doesn't stop here. We do plan to turn some of these into initiatives with the USC or work with HRO to resolve them. And I can't echo enough. Thank you for the shameless plug of the Your Voice survey, because I think that that's an important reminder to everyone to participate in. The climate survey hasn't been done in several years, right? I think it's been 4 years since our last university-wide campus climate survey. So it's a very important opportunity to provide your feedback in. We are 13 minutes until the end of time, so I think we have time for a few more questions. And one of them, I'm going to circle back to the communication around the rescinded salary letters and the merit increase. So the question is, what steps are being taken to clear up communication with changes that happened after staff received salary letters to have those rescinded? April merit increases are helpful, but staff retention begins with recognition. This is not a complete step, and it should be more fully, comprehensively addressed.
Take that one. It's a hot potato, and that's my job. And far be it from the Biden administration to criticize the Trump administration. So prefacing by that, there was some misunderstanding. I think it's about the best I can say between the Chancellor's office and President Young's office And that letter that President Young put out about when on the raises did not have, at least from the systems point of view, did not have systems blessing, and the presidents are constrained on these matters when the budgets are tight. There has to be very good communication and not just communication, two-way understanding of what that communications is about. And I can assure you, I took a lesson from that to make damn sure, excuse my language, that I understand what the budgetary constraints are and what the president is able to say and able to do in this regard. And so that's about all I can say on that. Is that there was no malice, but that happened, and I'm very sorry it happened on behalf of everyone. And I won't say nothing like that will ever happen again, because it might, but it won't be because I'm not really trying to pay attention to these things. But it's an unusual period of time that we don't, thank God, we don't get a pandemic every year. And the state was sending signals to the system, and the system was sending signals to the presidents, and some of those signals got misinterpreted, and we ended up in this situation. So please try to be forgiving. I can tell you with authority, this is a tough spot to sit in, and the presidents are human beings, and they don't always get it right. And on this score, it was painful, I'm sure. And I apologize on behalf of the university that this happened.
Thank you. We've received a couple of more incoming Q&As regarding staffing. Let's see. What if a department head isn't given the resources they need because they run a service-oriented department? The head of our division has stated that staffing is not based on our workload, so it leads to many staff members in the service-oriented offices overworked, underpaid, and undertitled. Does leadership realize how much more intricate and interconnected processes have become? The university needs to do better.
Congratulations, Mark. I'll throw that one to you.
That's a challenging question, but you know, I would hope that each department head, division head, or whatever recognizes that work has to be done and sufficient staff has to be in place to do that work, and moreover, sufficient financial compensation has to be provided. Without knowing specifically what prompted this question, I can't go into details, but you know, in principle, that's where I'm at. So if there are evidences of divisions or departments or whatever that are understaffed, then we need to take a look at that. I just need to, I guess speaking broadly for the administration, we all need to be aware that it might be in I don't know, Division of Student Affairs or Finance or whatever, but we need to be aware of those situations.
And I shamelessly will plug, if there are specific instances that staff are concerned about retaliation and bringing these types of things up to leadership, that is what the staff@tamer.edu email is for. We can raise issues on behalf of divisions, departments, and individual staff without sharing information that might result in you being retaliated against. And again, that is actually a basic right protected for you by ATRO. You should not be retaliated upon by bringing truth and information to the attention of leadership. But should that be a fear, that is what that tool is for.
Now, Christina, I agree 100% with that. We've got rules, processes, procedures in place that are in place because we want to guard against that. I want the environment here to be one where if there are concerns, no matter what position the employee is in, he or she should feel comfortable raising that concern without the fear of retaliation. If there is retaliation, then that supervisor needs to be held accountable for that and be subject to whatever the appropriate sanctions are.
Yes, and I threw you some really tough hardballs at the end, so I apologize for that. But I do want to tell you, we've received a great deal of thanks from our audience on making this forum approachable and accessible. That some of the questions were difficult, but I think it's important that staff be able to access leadership and share their comments and their concerns. And like I said, if we didn't get to your question today, we will. Just give us some time. You know how things go in higher ed, not the fastest. Sorry. So I'm going to throw one last question out there, and it's easy to wrap things up. And it is, and some of you have already touched on this thinking about it, but what is the timeline for your position as interim? I know Dr. Junkins, your successor has been identified, but what does the timeline look? Dr. Weichold, you mentioned a year and a half. What does that look like moving forward?
Let me respond without ambiguity, without much ambiguity anyway. In 21 days, plus some unknown number of days margin, but there will be a regents meeting called and a vote will be taken, and I fully expect it to be unanimous again. That the finalist is appointed as the next president, based on conversations between me, the chancellor, and Dean Banks, soon to be President Banks. Already, I know her start date is expected to be June 1, which is the date I won't be back at my day job, Professor John and Director of the Institute for Advanced Study. So we know I'm fairly firm on that date. I have also have a informal understanding with the Chancellor and President-elect, soon-to-be President-elect Banks, that the formal transition will happen, start on or about the 1st of May. So I will still be present until June 1, but I will be trying to help spline into the Banks presidency during the month of May. And I expect a lot of her interactions with the current vice presidents, and that would include you, Annie, and you, Mark, will be extensive during that 1 month to be sure that she understands what everyone is doing and look into the future. I expect there will be informal connections, get acquainted connections with and exchanges with me even before that May 1st timeframe, but we will be in a serious transition mode, time shared with graduations and all the other fun in May to let President Banks hit the ground running or hit the ground listening, as the case may be. Some combination of those two stances in the June 1 timeframe. And let me just say, I fully believe, heart and soul, that this is the beginning of a golden era in the history of Texas A&M University. She is one of the most, maybe the most qualified president in our history, who has proven beyond a shadow of doubt that she's an agent of transformative change in this zip code in advance of her becoming the president. Her credentials, I believe, other than myself, she's the only previous president who is a member of a national academy in their field. She has international respect as a scholar and an educator, and she is a tremendous leader. So anyway, I just endorse her, and I wasn't joking when I said she'll be a lot better than the second coming of Jenkins. She will be. Because she has a lot of experience and leadership that I didn't have in trying to do this as an interim. She's a pro, and she's good, and she's a first-generation student, so she understands a land grant concept in her soul. I just think great things. So that's not the timing issue, but I wanted to tell you, look forward to a great leader taken this role in my wake.
Dr. McGowan.
Yes, so the answer to that question for me is I have no idea. This is a trickle-down effect. The first stage has been executed. We have a president. As Dr. Weichold pointed out, the next stage would be to identify the provost, and then the provost would have a role in identifying the direction that they would go in with respect to the vice president for diversity. So I am willing to serve for as long as I'm needed, but I actually have no idea how long this will take for this all to play out.
And Christina, I'd just add to that, I said 12 to 18 months in my case. And my thinking is as follows: we get a new president on the ground. We'll put together the search committee, go through that. The earliest that I could imagine the search committee producing a provost would be to have that person seated by January of 22. So that's the 12 months. 18 months would be having the provost seated mid-summer of 22 or something like that. So that's my thinking, how I came to that estimate. Could go faster, could go slower, who knows, but that's as good as I can guess at this point. I know we're out of time, but I just want to say how much, Christina, I appreciate your leadership in the University Staff Council, and all of your officers did a great job organizing today's symposium. And I appreciate that, and appreciate the opportunity to hear what's on the minds of everybody and do our best to respond to those questions. Unfortunately, none of the three of us are omniscient, and I hope everybody understands the limitation of our knowledge and everything. And so when we said if we need to contact others or something like that, we're not trying to dodge the question or anything. Just want to make sure that you get the most accurate answers rather than it's just something that pops out of my head. Thanks again, Christina. Great job. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you all so much. I just want to, in conclusion, as a kind reminder, I feel like I'm a broken record, but if your question wasn't answered today, we do plan on posting answers and the recording of today's panel on our website, which is staff.tamu.edu. Oh, that side, right there.
Let me add a thank you, Christina, very much. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but let me add a thank you, Christina, and thank you to the staff for your service of the university. And also, I would really like to express publicly my sincere thank you to Annie and Mark. Having three interims in the administration is rather unusual. I can tell you that our jobs aren't interim. We have had an incredible amount of work accomplished, and collegiality and good working relationships, and that really has to do with the quality of the people. And I'm looking at two of them, Annie and Mark. I really appreciate you, and thank you again to all of the staff gathered here. This university would go nowhere without you. And as I indicated to you, we're listening, and we will act on what we can from the issues that arose here. We'll be looking to have communication through Mark and Annie to the appropriate individuals to see if we can do some things to foster what we've heard, and especially with respect to the survey that you're filling out, we'll try to reflect on what the university can do to make life better.
Agreed. Echo the same. Thank you for having me, and hope that the staff will take kindly to my offer to hear out your suggestions and recommendations, that you have an advocate for your position in the Office of Diversity right now. So let's make this time count. Would love to engage you in understanding what the issues are and how you think they might be addressed.
Thank you all. Yes, that summarizes it up beautifully. We will have a recording of today's panel, and the questions that were answered or also weren't answered on our website as well soon. We'll email a link out and just bring awareness to the fact that that's on our website once we complete that. And in the meantime, if there's anything that the USC can do for you or staff overall, I encourage you to email staff@tamu.edu. Thank you all for attending and participating, and have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.